right, so I'm excited to get to the questions. We have now approached the Q&A. I hope you all are getting something or enjoying our conversation, because I certainly am. So I'm going to read these questions. Gabby, if you have anything to share, let's just see what the folks want, because we got some good ones. So the first one, this came from Steph. It's how does one discover their purpose? Is this something that you can only get from God through prayer? So I think Gabby kind of touched on it. I'll share, because I had, when you were saying yours earlier, I thought, God, how awesome that it seemed to me. So, when you describe meeting Rhea and kind of segueing into what impassioned you to work with, foster youth. So for me, it's kind of funny. I believe purpose is less of like what you do and more about the qualities that you possess and then how you use them. So for me, I'll give the example. I know that I mentioned a little bit about how I had to like do a life assessment. I'm a very introspective person. I stay journaling, I stay praying. I'm always asking, remember, asking questions since I was little. I'm like, Lord, what is it? But the one crazy part is I wrote a speech. I'm gonna give a shout out to Toastmasters. But when I was in Toastmasters, when you join, you have to do a welcome speech. And it's a 5-minute speech. And who would have known in my 5-minute speech that I decided to write, and it was entitled What Drives Me. But I tell you, this was kind of the moment, the aha moment, where I needed. And the issue with me, I was working in the music industry. I was doing makeup. I always had 50 jobs. You guys know, those that know me, I'm a Jamaican. So I have 50 jobs. I got this master's in marriage and family therapy, but I literally took a hard right. I got a job on a television show the day I turned my thesis in. So it was like I never really did what my colleagues did and go straight to I used to work at an agency in the Valley. I didn't go to the agency. I went to a set to work. So then I had this knot in my stomach all these years about wasting money and not having impact and not doing what everybody else did. So fast forward, and I was in entertainment 10 years plus. So this day at Toastmasters, the speech was called What Drives Me. And the reason why I would say God gave it to me, because it was kind of just dropped. And the thing about drive, when I looked at it, drive is like what gives shape to something, or what the impulse. So if you think about a vehicle and like you're driving, there's a force, there's a motor that's moving that vehicle forward. So when I was just writing my little notes, I said, oh, what drives me? And I came up with a few things. There was one, I said I was driven by people, or two people. So I was always wanting to help people. 7th grade moment. I was always wanting to gravitate toward activities that, that I would learn more about people, or just, dive in and have stories. So that was one. I knew that I was driven by questions. And I'm coining the term of me being the question connoisseur, but that has come up because my whole life, no matter what situation you put me in, I'm going to ask questions no matter what. So it's caused me to be more resourceful. It's caused me to really be like a strategic problem solver, because I'm always asking, why do they do this? How can I make this better? I don't know. It was just an innate desire for me to ask questions. The other thing I came to know is I overcome trials. So going through things in life and seeing that I was resilient and being able to not let it totally, some people go through things and they get completely knocked off their track. And I said, you know what, one thing that I want to do, and this was all kind of, to Gabby's point, kind of fishing through, it wasn't all linear, because I still felt like a fish out of water. Whether I was working as a therapist or working in entertainment, I felt like I was not doing what I should have did. So it was always this tug of war and this kind of insecurity to some extent. But then I said, you know what, there's no challenge that can't be overcome. That was what I started to adopt, because I would get this job and that job. And then lastly, I knew that I was always driven by purpose. So I was always, I knew I was different, because I never could say, like, people be like, oh, you went to school for this, but you doing this. That was me. And I always said, yeah, but I knew I was designed to help people get unstuck. I knew that I, wanted to change the world, to motivate, encourage, to give hope to people, to let them know, hey, no matter what happened yesterday, let's just start new. Let's figure out a plan. And I always want people to win. I want processes, people, businesses, whoever I help, they're going to be better after that. So that was kind of my long answer to that. So even if someone is not religious or not spiritual and doesn't, believe in constant prayer and journaling, I believe that there's a way, that you can tap into that. Gabby, do you want to add anything about that?
Rhea. That's why I always call you. If I do need a little pick me up, it's usually you I call, because
well, thank you.
Do it, yeah. Like
Well, that's my answer to thank you. That's a blessing because I don't always feel like a pick me up. So I'm grateful that I could pick somebody else up. Okay, so that was Steph's question. So hopefully I answered that in terms of she said, is that only something you can get from God? And I would say yes, because I'm a believer of God, but even for those who don't identify or with a religion, if you have anything that anchors you, any type of, I'm going to say yes, it comes from God, but I think it can be revealed in a variety of ways. And so Tiffany asked the question, so what confirmation do you look for to know that you're living in your purpose? So I know what confirmation. Gabby, did you look for any confirmations to know that you were living in your purpose?
It's just like I said, a knowing, like I know when I hear from God, and I know when I'm out of alignment, and I know when I'm doing things that are just not making my soul filled. I just feel like just not good. There's something off. So one thing, I know this is going to sound a little woo woo, but I feel like God speaks to me through numbers. I have like a couple of numbers that I see on a regular basis. I also have butterflies are kind of like a big thing. I know it sounds a little woo woo, but
You could woo 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 all you want.
sometimes like I'll just be in a thought, like having like a download or something, or not be. Actually, today is one of those examples. I really wasn't having like the best day today. It wasn't like anything bad, but I just wasn't inspired. I was just kind of like, okay, God, I'm waiting for you to show me something, and I'm just waiting around, and nothing was coming. It just wasn't flowing. And so I went outside and I saw the sunset, and I saw something. I can't really put it into words, but it was something, and I felt this peace, and I knew, I was like, okay, God. And then I just I got a word, and it was about community, and how girls and women need community, how we need each other. And I was like, wow, I needed that. I needed that I don't know where it came from, but it just kind of like came through, and I was like, okay. And now I feel peaceful. Now I feel like, okay, I'm inspired. Now I'm going to get off the Zoom, and I'm going to probably stay up all night and get in my zone. Because I have so much of those times where it's just like nothing. There's literally like empty, dead space, and I feel like I'm purposeless. And then all of a sudden it'll just be like divine download. And actually I have a really interesting story to share, which I don't know how much time we have left. But
is it quick? You can do it quick because we have a few more questions to get to.
Okay.
Well, but yeah, if it's relevant, it might bless somebody.
What'd you say?
We're not on IG. We're not gonna get cut off.
Okay.
But is it relevant to the question?
Yeah, it is. But it's kind of a long story, so maybe I'll keep it pushing.
Okay, we'll save it for the after show.
I have different signs that I see, and like different piece, like a feeling that I have to let me know I'm in purpose. So we'll leave it at that.
Well, that's still a good answer, because I think, Tiff, when you ask that question, I like to have confirmation about things too, because I don't believe in wasted time. And I always have this thought, like, I don't want to disappoint God. I don't want to be 1 degree off. I don't want to operate in my third gift. Like, I've always said things like that because I'm super intentional. So I love that you say that. For you, it's butterflies and numbers. And like the way that God can speak to you is the way you get your confirmation. For me, I look at 3 things. I think I look at what motivated me. So, how I talked about my Toastmaster speech, where I'm like, what is driving me to that thing? So I look at the motivation. I look at the fruit. Like, am I fruitful? Like, are people being impacted by what I'm doing? Like, the Bible talks about how you could tell a tree by its fruit. Like, and this is a tricky one, because, folks be like, oh, it was my purpose to sing. And you'd be like, oh, like that revelation ain't hit my ears yet, like that could happen. But the truth is, I mean, I'm being you know what I'm saying? There's a million and thousands of folks that believe their purpose is to act. But if it doesn't mean that if you don't get any acting jobs, that's not your purpose. Because I don't ever try to speak on what someone else's purpose is. But I know for me, I believe if there's fruit in what you're doing, meaning, and fruit can be different for different people, but is there influence? For me, I think, and I also look at how I react. So like when I woke up this morning, even yesterday morning, all I could think about was this conversation and the way this lined up to be. it was like I didn't even have to seek it. So one, I'm grateful for all of you guys that are on here. I'm grateful for Kim texting me to say, hey, Rhea, I know you wanted to move more into the talk show interview space. She reached out to me. Gabby, we were just walking, catching up. So I look at all those things and it lit me up. Every question that came in, like that is a confirmation. Like when I light up about something or I can't stop thinking about it, that's how I look for that confirmation, or that's what confirms it for me. So here's a question that I think you might be able to speak to. So this came, the question is, does your purpose have a pivot? Not evolve, but change. If so, how do you know when it's time to let one go and follow another? That's a great question.
That is a good question. That's how I felt with my beauty truck. Because every time I would do a party, I would just go home and be in tears. I did not enjoy it. I really didn't. And I was, like I said, I was working with all these privileged kids, you know, that could pay a lot of money. Their parents could pay a lot of money for a party. And I was like, these are just not my girls. And not that they aren't my girls. I'm for everybody, you know, and I love all girls. But it was just something about, I want to work with girls, to be honest, a little more that look like me and that I could relate to. That when I see them, I could be like, you know, I could see myself in them when I was their age, you know. So that was my pivot where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna still do it because I love work, and I just changed a lot of things about it. Like I made sure that that message about inner beauty was coming forward. But I can't control all the time who my customers are, you know. So I was like, I have to do something for me. So I pivoted and did society. So that's what
and what a graceful pivot that was. Okay. I think for me, I can definitely say my answer to that. I don't know if the person is on the call, but I think we all just have to tune in, you know. So remember, if someone is feeling a nudge to like leave one thing behind, or like maybe I should do something else, there's a reason for that. So I don't believe in like necessarily letting something go, but I think is rather saying like taking the core of who you are and just being open to doing different things. And I think cultivating purpose happens through that openness. So I'll give an example. All of you guys know, like the ones that know me, I've had a million jobs: therapist, makeup artist, commercial property management. I worked personal assistant, bartending, road managing, life coaching, consulting, counseling, project manager, all of these things. But guess what? The same thread through each one of those jobs, I felt like I was still moving in my purpose because I was still asking questions. I was still working with people. I was still encouraging, giving hope. I was still saying, hey, guess what? We could strategize to make this thing better or make your path better. And I could say that now, but there was many a years that I felt guilty. I'll be sitting in, you know, when I worked at the college, it was one school I was at, like, oh, I'm stealing somebody's job. Like, I need to be working in entertainment. I'm wasting time. But God had to put me there to give me the sustenance, to give me provision to really do, you know, and I'm still on the journey. But whoever is out there that might want to pivot, I don't ever want to think that you have to like let something go, but I would say be open, just be open. And again, take that quiet time with yourself to say, what, you know, what am I good at? What are, you know, what are my strengths? And that's usually something that I start with. Like I do a life assessment, if you will. So the next question, all right, this question says, should each individual's purpose contribute towards improving humanity in some way? Or can the purpose of, can be like of some impact on a smaller scale? I think this is a great question.
great question.
It is. What do you think about that, Gabs?
I think it could totally impact on a smaller scale.
Well,
Even
should it?
should it? Well, even if it's just for you, you know, like it doesn't have to be for the whole world sometimes. You know, like I was saying earlier about being a mother and, you know, a wife, or, you know, maybe that might be your only purpose. You know, maybe that's what you really want deep down in your heart. That's all you want. And yeah, I guess that is like impacting the future. I mean, on the most beautiful, largest scale that you could really think of if you think about it. But it's such a simple thing that women do every day.
Yeah.
You know, but maybe that's it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was my, when I looked at this question and I thought that was my immediate thought. What caught me is she asked like, should the individual's purpose contribute? And I think none of us should define like what makes humanity better, because God created all things. So I feel like if there's a desire in your heart or something that you're good at, you know, it's going to impact the world for the better, because every problem has a solution. Like the person who invented a light bulb or this chair that I'm sitting on is making me better because I'd be on the floor. Like I just think that I think what gets people caught up sometimes and stuck is we might be fixated on maybe judgment from others, or like I would be so deep, like trying to make it so deep. And I think that that held me back. Like, who would think, oh, my purpose is asking questions? Oh, my purpose is just being organized. But guess what? There is a million people out there that need people to ask them a certain question to tap into that enlightenment, or need someone to help organize their life, their business, their family, like that's what I think about. Some of these moguls and these, huge folks in life, they give props to their spouse or the person that's holding it down, teaching their kids, loving their kids, rearing their kids with integrity and love. Like that's all purpose to me. So I definitely see like all things. I think we all are like a big old puzzle, and whatever that thing that's, swimming around in our soul, or, making our heart feel like it's on fire, I believe it's all for the greater good. And none of us should judge like what's big or small, because the bottom line is all small things. Like I always tell when I work with clients, I'll say, small choices lead to actions, which leads to habits, which leads to changing your whole life. So if you feel like my purpose is small, I liken it in the same way. Like it's all a part of a bigger outcome. So that child that you raising up and loving and tending to, or that family, I hate to say it like this, but you're like preventing, we look at the opposite. If you weren't doing that, then it could be a ripple effect of a whole bunch of outcomes, So I think that's encouraging. All right, Zakia asked, can you explain the differences between consciously and unconsciously walking in your purpose and what that looks like? So, Kia, I hope I don't butcher this, but consciously and unconsciously, I guess what I think about that is, conscious to me is like intention. So when you're conscious of something, that means like you're aware of it, or you're responding to it. So for those that have sought after, I remember the poll earlier, there was a 40 something percent of you guys that felt like what your purpose is. So that means that you're conscious of it. But I think when I think of unconsciously walking in purpose, I think of like a well-oiled machine, or like, how people use the term a knee-jerk reaction, or like just kind of doing what you're naturally good at. I think that sometimes you find yourself doing it, you just haven't asked the question yet, or maybe you haven't had that aha moment to say, oh, this is why God put me here. So I don't know. I thought that was a pretty interesting question about consciously walking in it and unconsciously. I think we all probably unconsciously walk in it until we ask. You know what I mean? Gabby, do you have any thoughts about that, or anybody else? Feel free, folks. Sorry, I know we're getting to almost the end, but does anybody have any other thoughts on that? Do you, Gabs? About conscious versus unconsciously walking in purpose?
That's
We
a
got
deep.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, good. We have three
Yeah,
more.
some other people can talk if they want. I'm
Okay.
still ruminating on that one.
Okay. Yeah, me too. I mean, we don't all have to. I'm trying to see if, okay, good. I don't see any hands. So I could go to our next question and then we can open it up. So the next question is, how do you stay focused? All right, I'm sure the moms out here can feel this one. How do you stay focused on your purpose when your days are consumed with obligations to all but yourself? So that's good.
About that life, so
Well, yeah, I could speak to that. I don't have any children, but yet. Come on, yet. But what I know is that I've always been very consumed. And again, I would pray that God use me to help people. And then in the same breath, be open. So when you're open and then you ask to help, then you have the capacity, you have a capacity to fill up. And so what I learned, and Gabby, you will high five me on this, but there was a podcast interview that Tony Robbins did with my soul sister, Sarah Blakely, who created Spanx. And the interview, by the way, was amazing. So if you guys are interested, I will tell you, but it was called Start Small, Think Big, Scale Quickly. And in that interview, she was talking about how exponential her company, it just grew exponentially overnight. And one thing she said that she did, now she referenced this as like bucketing her days, but I stole part of that and I bucket my time. So for that person who feels like your days are consumed, with everyone but yourself, I would say begin to bucket your time. Today's October 1st. For some of you, it might be late, but I'm very intentional with first days of the month or first days of the week. But when she talked about bucketing her time, she was saying that on different days of the week, she said, declare this is the day I'm going to do this. So we might not all have that luxury to like block an entire day out, but when you bucket your time, you can say for 30 minutes in one day, I'm going to write a business plan, or I'm going to jot down my ideas for the day. I'm going to, whatever that is, fill in the blank. If it's, I'm going to sit in quiet, or 15 minutes. It doesn't even have to be a long time, but the key with that, in terms of like, the question was, how do you stay focused on your purpose? I think it's just intentional. It's like you have to develop, and this is, again, I'm trying not to be too coachy, but develop a proactive habit. So when you develop a habit and being proactive in it, you're declaring, I'm going to do that thing and doing it. And for those of you that might have spouses or children, or maybe, you're responsible for a lot, being able to ask for help. Hey, friend, for this 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, can if I say I'm going to start intentionally focusing on me for 30 minutes in one week, I would encourage that person to try to do that. Like, just try to bucket your time, see it, start small, ask for what you need. Because otherwise, if you keep staying in the same routine, you're never going to get to see any change. All right, go ahead.
My sister will run away from her kids. She will just go away somewhere, just whoever she could leave them with. Or they could go in their room for a few minutes or whatever, just she's sometimes like, I just need me time.
Yeah.
So that's the only way I can relate. But I hear that a lot, like, how do you focus down when you have all these distractions?
Yeah. I think it's just about, again, when you're a giver, when you're consumed, when you have a lot of roles that you wear, there's always time. There's always time to make a change. So we have two more questions. So I think here's another one. What is the lifetime span on developing purpose? Is there a shelf life? I love this. I don't believe that there's a shelf life to purpose personally. I believe that it's developed. I think that the enlightenment can come at different phases, kind of how you and I both talked about, Gabby. It's not always I got an idea, or I got awakened out of my sleep. I think it's cultivated through time. Do you think it's a shelf life? I don't think it is.
No, it's so funny because that guy and I were talking about that last night, about how most people discover their purpose later on in life. And I even think with myself or with you or anybody else on this call, we might have a purpose that's, one thing right now, and it might change. And by the time we're like 50, 60, 70, we might have a whole another purpose. You just don't know.
I agree.
Bring for you. So
I agree. Again, that pivot, that being open. All right. So Cleo asked, that's our last question, and then we'll just take a pulse on the house as we round up. Cleo said, being an influencer seems to be the biggest money-making trend. Isn't it, Cleo? Okay. That's not my arena. Ideas on gifts of service as an added income. I love this question. And you know why, Cleo? I'm going to tell you why. I never met you before, but I'm going to tell you why I love it. I have always been what you would call a Jamaican hustler. And what I know is, especially in this particular age, there is a need that needs to be filled somewhere. So my advice, I don't believe everybody's called to be an influencer. So amen on that, because you know yourself, you're like, that's not my area. But you did mention, gifts of service. So I would start with what is it that you do really, really well? Like, with your eyes closed, what could you do in your sleep? Like, what are your greatest qualities? If you don't know, ask the people that are closest to you, even if it's one person. Hey, what do you think I'm good at? And I would start writing those things down. It may not happen just like that, but you would be amazed how what we might deem as the smallest task or thing, I mean, there's a need out there. So I would start with that. And I appreciate your mindset, because that's where I'm at. And a lot of the girlfriends that are friends in my network or circle, we always talk about multiple revenue streams. So I would start at the things that you're good at. I would, kind of just do some research. I know someone told me to do that before. Like, once I came up, I wanted to start like this concierge kind of business, and they're like, look and see, try to Google around or see if there are any other folks doing what you're doing. I don't necessarily put too much weight behind that statement, because even if, then you get discouraged, which is what happened to me, because you might see 100 people that have that gift. Then you don't want to discourage yourself, like, oh, I don't think I need to do it because there's 100 concierge services out there. Well, no, because they're not me, they're not you, Cleo. So that is something I'm currently learning as we sit on this Zoom with all of you, because everybody got a Zoom these days, but I just pressed past it, telling myself it wouldn't be purposeful, but we're here. Amen. So hopefully I answered your question. I don't know, Cleo, if you want to elaborate, feel free to. But basically, that's where I would start. I would just start with like listing out and thinking, kind of really looking inward and saying, writing out those things. And then, this is where I think, like Gabby said, sometimes we need people to help. Sometimes the light bulb comes to you. But my prayer, because I'm a praying woman, is that once you do write that list, I do pray that you would get, a little more direction in terms of that. So whether it's helping folks, are you good with numbers? Are you good with organizing? You want people to feel better? You don't like people at all. And, you might like gardening. I'm starting to see all kind of businesses being birthed, especially through this pandemic. I just saw a guy friend of ours, many of us on this call, his business is bringing plants back to life. Like, talk about a niche purpose, So I was like, hey, I got excited because I'm like, clearly he resonated with that and felt like and I got a plant dying right outside in my living room. So that's exactly what I mean about how you can think it's the smallest purpose in the world. And then as you move in it, people will start to come. So that's my encouragement, Cleo.
I wanted to say something, Rhea. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
That Sarah Blakely interview, the first point right before she said the start small, think big, scale quickly, she said, the very first thing you need to ask yourself is, what's in it for them? And I love that too, because a lot of times we think it's all about us, and it's like, how can you serve other people?
Oh, I love that.
What are you doing? Like, when you're doing something, like, how is that going to help other people? Of course, she built like her multi-million-dollar business, and she had her idea, but it wasn't going to sell if it wasn't going to actually help somebody. So she had to first think about, what's in it for them. Women want to look good in their clothes,
Come on, Gabby. If I had a mic, I would drop it. Because that's really, I think, because that is really what makes, Cleo, I'm glad, this is why my sister friend is here. In addition to making that list, again, having that that's where purpose comes in. So how she in the interview, if you guys, I'm really shouting out this interview, but it was so good. She talks about how she didn't have the whole why. I mean, she didn't have the whole how. Like, how's it going to happen? Where am I going to get the money for? You don't have to fill out the who, what, when, where, why. But what she knew was, I know women like to feel good in their clothes. When I put on this white pantsuit, I don't want to see, I don't want to see shapes and images. I want to see smooth and sleek. And she used that example. I'm not being funny, which is why I got on black at all times. But what I know is when and they have a whole bodysuit of Spanx these days. So I just got so much from that interview. So yes, Cleo, what impact is it going to have on folks? And again, it could be as small as writing calligraphy on an envelope, like allowing, anything you can think of. Like, I just get excited because I know there's so many different avenues out there that we can use our gifts. So that's awesome. So do we have any questions, any thoughts as we get ready to close? I'm so happy you guys stuck with us. Anything that you guys want to raise hands? Let me make sure, because otherwise we can round off. Feel free. I will share just some, closing thoughts. Gabby, do you have any that you want to share with the folks about purpose?
You did such a good job, Rhea. You did such a good job. And I think a lot of times, even though I said earlier about how, I don't really always like to share my ideas because I don't like to get, convoluted. I think that people, like purpose through people. I think that's such a huge part. You never know. Like, we were born into a family, we're in schools, or we do things and go about our lives pretty much every day, and you just never know who you're going to run into, like how we ran into each other and how, like, we're talking all together on this call. You just never know who that one person is that might be able to speak life into you. Like, you've spoken to my dreams so many times. And I think out of all your P's, the pain, the passion, the patience, I think the most important thing is people. You know, like we need each other. And that's
Yeah.
not necessarily to mean that you have to seek validation for every idea that you have, but we can't do anything alone. Like you'll never have a business if people don't buy your stuff or you're not serving anybody. You can't,
Yeah.
you know, live in a bubble or try to do anything alone. So I think that's, you know, my final thought is that people are so important. Like we need each other,
Yeah.
especially during these times. You know, everything's so crazy right now.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think the beauty about people is we need encouragement along the journey because like you said, you could fall off that bike so many times in pursuit of purpose, but it takes just having someone, you know, you don't need to have anybody to get you back on the bike, but it just helps. It really helps. I see your hand. Tashina, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I had a question and a comment. At first, I want to say you both did a phenomenal job in regards to helping me personally gain clarity on what my purpose is in life, and I just have like a clear vision of what it is that I'm currently doing and currently in right now, to be able to provide for others as well. But one of the questions that I did have was, do you all think reading certain books can assist with gaining clarity on your purpose? And the reason why I asked that question in particular is because I'm currently reading a book by Dr. Miles Monroe, and it's called Living with Purpose. It's a daily devotional for discovering your God-given potential.
Absolutely. 100%. And you know why? Because I am a book reader, buyer, purchaser, and writer. Hello. Speaking. I absolutely think you know why? I'll tell you why. We all, I'm kind of getting into counselor mode, but we all have different methods and ways of learning. And, you know, God speaks to us through different things. I could believe you could be watching a movie and have a moment to get purpose. So I absolutely believe, and Miles Monroe is so wise, and I believe God gifted him, rest his soul, and his wife and child that, you know, he's in heaven with. But I believe he was called to, like, some people are called to ignite purpose in others. And I've read a few of his books because he has so many on purpose. But I really believe that that was something he was called to do. So yes, if you are a book reader, if you're into books, they have audio books, they got ebooks. I really believe in that because the truth is, not everyone is a journaler. Not everybody prays. Not everybody has the capacity, time, space, energy to be writing out no list. So I never think that my way is the only way. So yeah, pick up that book. It's as simple as seeking. I think the bottom line is if your heart is seeking, if your mind is open, and if you're in a place to receive, then it could come through a song. You know, it could come any way. But yeah, I agree with that guy. And thank you for the
Thank
compliment.
you.
You made
Thank
me.
you.
Gabby, do you have anything to add to that before we close out?
I was just looking at my little stack of books. You know, I take books. I'm a big book reader. Like I'm such a nerd. Like I have books. If I could, I don't even like to read on the Kindle. So I still just
Oh.
pack it with me. And I have like a daily devotional that I read. It's like an everyday book, and it gives you. I mean, everybody, like you said, isn't a Christian or whatever, but for me, that's like my one thing I get up and do every day is my devotional. And then I have my friends who write books, like Michelle Harris Collins. You know, I got her reboot right here sitting, which
Yeah.
is amazing. And I got my journal. So like I love books. I love inspiration. And sometimes when we read, we forget what we read. So be able to process that and like meditate on it. Sister Bunny used to make me read read the scriptures like 3 times in a row, back to back. I'll be like, okay, I'm done. She'd be like, nope, read it again. Nope, read it again. Nope, read it again. Now tell me what it said. Because sometimes we just read and we don't actually like really let it sink in. So that's why usually after I read, I'll either be marking it up with notes, highlights, or I'll have a journal and get notes in there, because the journal is really cool too, because you can look back like 10 years later and be like, oh, look at where I came, look at how far I came, or I was doing this, and then you can even see how your journey and your purpose
has grown, and evolved. I'm a journaler too, so that's another little nugget before we leave, you guys. if you are of the writing kind, just, jot that down, because there's power in that, to be able to read back on October 1st, 2020, when you said, hey, I think I want to do this thing, or you even asked the question, help me see more clearly, like Tashina said, what my purpose is. I'm excited, because I believe that next year, this time, you're going to look at that, and you're going to be so blown away by what has happened and transpired. So I'm so excited. I just typed a little goodbye note. I just want to say thank you so much to you guys for joining. Like I said, this is volume 1. I do have some other nuggets that, I really want to have, purpose friendships, purpose relationships. I want to really talk about things that matter and things that are impactful. So I'm just grateful that you joined us tonight. Thank you so much to Kim. Thank you so much to Gabby. Visit my website, Rhealism.com. If you all, I do have a video on purpose, and I didn't even reference the video before doing this. So I'm like, wow, like, so interesting. But, as an ending, one thing I am, like I said, I'm a praying kind. There's a scripture that really was impressed on my heart, and it was in Proverbs, and it talks about the purposes of a purpose. A purpose of a person's heart is like deep waters, and he that has insight will draw it out. So I just want to put that out there. Like, purpose is in deep waters. It's not always something that's so readily like, oh, there it is. Oh, I know. It's not easy to get. And I think God does that a lot of times to cause us to seek and to cause us to look inward. So I just pray that we would all draw it out of our hearts and draw it out and activate it in this last quarter. I just pray. That's my prayer. I'm not going to turn this into church, but my prayer is that each of you, you all have a seed, you all have a purpose, we all have a gifting. And I just pray that by the time January comes, that thing is going to already be in the atmosphere. That's what my prayer is. So have a wonderful night. Thank you guys so much again. Oh, thank you. I'm glad, Gabby. Yes, society.com. You guys are so awesome. I love you, and have a good night.